Okay, so what we're going to do now is go right into the presentation intro, and we'll go into our resource presentation. So a couple rules that I do want to set as we go into this portion is that we'll hold all of our questions until the question and answer segment. There may be one piece that's a variation to that because we do have one of our partners that has to leave. But if you have any pressing questions following the presentations, all presenters will return to their resource tables immediately following their presentation. So first person I'd like to introduce to you, I actually get to call him a friend, is Mike Rafferty of the Detroit Economic Growth Corporation.
Right. All right, you can hear me without the microphone, I'm sure, right?
They're making us.
Got it. All right. Hi, everybody. I guess I'm going to start off by introductions here. So I'm the Vice President of Small Business Services at the Detroit Economic Growth Corporation. And I want to thank Councilmember Ayers and Council President Jones for putting this together, and for and of course for Councilmember McAllister for being a great representative of District 2. I want to just by a show of hands understand who I'm talking to before I go into deep detail about what we do and about what resources are out there. First off, by a show of hands, who is a small business owner? Okay, all right, that's great. Is there anybody in this room that's looking to start a business right now? Okay, that's good. That's good. All right. And last, who's heard of DEGC? Okay, it doesn't surprise me. Every time I go into a room like this, I ask that question. And it's, I was shocked the first time I asked it when I started this role almost 3 years ago. We've been around for 40 years, and I could bore you to tears and keep you here just about all night if I told you about everything that we've done over the last 40 years. But we've essentially been a quiet force in the city. We were started under the Coleman Young administration, and we've been rocking and rolling ever since, trying to strengthen Detroit's economy. And I'd say in the last 4 years, under Mayor Duggan and with partnership with City Council and under new leadership at DEGC, we started a function that I'm proud to oversee, the Small Business Service Division. It's understanding that nationwide, a lot of employment happens at small business, in small businesses. Goods and services throughout the country are often procured through from small businesses, and when we're looking at a city like Detroit, it's obvious that we need a lot of support making sure that the small businesses who are here stay here and strengthen, and the small businesses that are needed are able to open up, right? So first off, I want to thank you for what you do, because it's more than just providing goods and services to people. You employ people, and you have carried the culture of Detroit through thick and thin, and I appreciate that as a Detroiter. So, just thinking about, again, I could tell you all about DEGC and its history. I'd like to start off by saying I've got a colleague here who's going to step up to the mic at some point, who runs real estate. We have another division at DEGC that focuses on business development broadly, trying to bring in what we call big game from other places, that are going to employ lots of people. My colleague, Peter Chapman, was instrumental in bringing Ford to Detroit, as was Kenyatta, who will be talking later. My division, like I said, it started 3 years ago. If you've heard of Motor City Match, if you've heard of Motor City Restore, if you've heard of D2D, those are programs within my portfolio. And I encourage you to take a look at the websites if you're interested in those programs. I'll go into brief detail about what those programs are in just a moment. But those are just a few tools that exist within the larger, what we call ecosystem of business support organizations throughout the city. Have you heard of Prosper Us? Anybody? Yes. All right. Prosper Us. SBA is a federal organization that has a lot of influence on what happens in the city of Detroit and lots of other cities. We have a lot of CDFI partners, community development finance institutions that help folks get access to capital. We, essentially sit with a lot of those tools to try to provide the support necessary for businesses to grow. I was an entrepreneur at one point. I know exactly how hard it is. My mom was an entrepreneur at one point. I mean, I know how hard it's like giving birth to something when you start a business, and it's like raising a child, you know, and doing it the right way when it's working. And just like we say, it takes a village to raise a kid. It's no different with a business, and that's part of the reason why I'm really glad, you know, to be part of an organization that acknowledges that. An administration and, you know, a body of council members who acknowledge it and work diligently to, you know, support our programming. Now, I call those tools, Motor City Match, Motor City Restore, et cetera. Every tool needs a mechanic, right? And one of the things that, you know, we acknowledged a couple months ago was that all of our tools from within our, you know, kit, our portfolio, and throughout the city, need to have people who can basically diagnose your challenges and your problems and go out, look in the toolkit, find the right solutions for you, and help you grow. We hired somebody for District 2. Her name is Amy. You want to stand up and raise your hand? Amy is our mechanic. We call them the District Business Liaisons. And, you know, I'm just kind of run through a scenario here. If you're, you know, starting a business right now and, you know, you need to get across the finish line and have that ribbon cutting, it's quite possible that you may need some support, you know, getting your permits, right? It's very possible that if it's a $250,000 budget, you might need another $200,000 to close the gap. We have a program, like I said, Motor City Match helps with things like that, but it's not going to cover everything. It's a hand up, it's not a hand out. And there are, you know, lots of other solutions that can help. Amy is a person who can essentially diagnose what you need, go in her toolkit, and make sure you've got the right tools. So, you know, I don't want to overdo my portion of this for a couple of reasons. One, we have resources outside that I'd love for you to grab. I mentioned the small business support ecosystem. There's a book out there on a table that one of my colleagues is sitting at called BizGrid, right? And it's something that you can look through and find the tools that you need, both within DEGC and outside of it. Motor City Match, she's, you know, Kira Coakley is able to speak deeply about the Motor City Match program and about Motor City Restore. And BizGrid, BIZGRID. And if you don't like paper, you can go on the website. It's bizgriddetroit.com. Right? There's also motorcitymatch.com and motorcityrestore.com. And I have another colleague here who's going to talk about D2D. If you think about business to consumer, some of you are probably business to consumer businesses, or B2B businesses too, where you just, you know, serve, you know, where you sell to businesses. D2D is essentially trying to, you know, increase the amount of contracting between suppliers and buyers in the city of Detroit. And the website there is d2d.com. You're going to hear more from those colleagues. So again, I'm not going to go too far into detail, but I'm going to stick around for a little bit if you want to talk one-on-one. And again, thank you very much for your service to Detroit. I appreciate it.
All right, thank you, Mike. And just to let everyone know, let me apologize to you because I'm really a stickler about time, that we are a little bit behind schedule, so we're going to play a little catch up here. But just also know that at any time after a person has spoken, you can go out to the resource table and then speak to that person. So next up from the Detroit Building Authority, we have Jill Bryant.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jill Bryant. I'm with the Detroit Building Authority, and I am representing the Detroit Building Authority on this discussion. I'd first of all like to start off thanking Council President Jones' office for including the DBA in this important discussion, as well as Councilmember Ayers and my fellow team members. I call my team members DEGC and everyone else that's on the agenda today. We all work together in getting this done for you and getting properties in your hands so that you can do what it is that you want to do for your growing business. Since 2015, the DBA has been responsible for the maintenance and management and sale of city-owned property. We are located at 1301 3rd, which is the former, clicker, okay, I don't never use the clicker. Which is the former MGM temporary casino right there at the corner of Michigan and 3rd. We're in Suite 328, and our phone number is 224-4514 or 628-0904. So if you have any questions about purchasing property, even still after I get done and we don't get a chance to talk today, you can please call those 2 phone numbers and someone will gladly assist you. What type of property does the city own? The city owns all types of property: vacant land, commercial buildings, industrial buildings, former school buildings, and residential. Initially, it was set up that, in 2014, it was set up that the land bank would become the owner of all residential property and that the city would maintain its commercial properties. It didn't quite happen like that, but most of the residential has been transferred to the land bank for management and sale. However, the city does still own a few residential properties. What should you do before you apply to purchase city-owned property? I would strongly suggest that you make sure you have paid all of your outstanding blight tickets, if you have any, and pay any outstanding tickets owed to the city. Please note that if we receive your application and you have outstanding blight tickets or owe any taxes, we will cancel your application, send you a denial letter with the amounts that we have identified that you have outstanding. Once you have remedied the situation, you can bring in documentation to prove that you have remedied that, and then we will proceed with processing your application. We will not look up to see if you have paid that off, but we hold that as your responsibility to do that. You bring that in, and then we will proceed with your application. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, how do you find city-owned properties to purchase? There are 2 websites that I would suggest you visit. The first one is detroitmi.gov/properties. That is the website that my office manages and controls. So I can give you more information on that later in the presentation. I will give you more information. The other one is detroitdevelopment.org. We don't necessarily manage it, but I strongly suggest that you visit both of those websites, as they have slightly different information, but you can purchase property from either one. The application is on actually both of those. Geez, I'm sorry, I keep going to my paper. Forgot I have a clicker here. Okay, detroitmi.gov/properties. Again, it has the application, it has frequently asked questions, and it has properties being marketed by the city. Please note that if you have identified a property that you want to purchase and you don't see it listed as being marketed, please still continue to apply for that property. It doesn't mean the city won't sell it. The properties that are being marketed just are properties that the city has identified that it wants to sell. DetroitDevelopment.org is a new website. I think it was developed earlier this year or late last year. There, again, you can purchase city-owned property, and you can also purchase Detroit Land Bank property. And I should have mentioned, from either website, you can apply for a land bank or city-owned property. To understand development opportunities and request for proposals, that you can do that on that site, and to also understand the planning areas in Detroit. The planning department has been restructured, and as I said, they no longer sell property of city ownership, but they are doing what the mayor envisioned that planning should be doing, is they're planning out the city. So you can explore the planning and housing priority areas there. Also, you can understand the retail and commercial landscape of the city. And I would please note that the information on both of these websites is subject to change. And please note that because you apply to purchase property does not guarantee that the property will or can be sold. Had an interesting conversation first thing this morning before 8:30. Person called in saying that the person called was actually an attorney, and indicated that his client had been denied because the city had decided to market the property. So please note that your request to apply is not a guarantee that it can or will be sold. but we will take all applications. The city does take all applications under advisement and review. And one more thing about Detroit Development, didn't go into as much. DetroitDevelopment.org is a wonderful site. It has a map of the city of Detroit, and all of the city-owned property is identified on that map. However, again, as I said, just because you see it identified on the map as city-owned does not mean it's available, and those properties change due to sale or other transactions affecting the ownership of those properties. How do you apply to purchase city-owned properties? Again, you visit detroitmi.gov/properties or detroitdevelopment.org. They both will take you to the application, which can be completed online. Just some of the, I would strongly suggest that you complete the application in its entirety. And some of the sections in the application are the address of the property that you are applying for. I would strongly suggest that you give a detailed intended use, your offer price, market value. The city of Detroit sells its properties at market value. I would suggest that you do some due diligence to determine if your use is zoning compliant, that you provide a timeline of once you purchase the property, what are you going to do with it? So let's say you are inquiring on purchasing vacant land. So you would put on your application, you're going to purchase this vacant land and you plan to build a retail store. So I would suggest you put on your application, you're going to purchase this vacant land, and let's just say you apply for it August 1st. So let's be kind of realistic. You'll probably have it in your hands by December 1st. I'm just, throwing dates and numbers out there. So you would say, come January 2019, you will keep the vacant land maintained or sidewalk shoveled. Come the spring, you will keep the grass cut. Come spring, you will start your footings or what have you, or you will reach out to your architect and the cost this much and put how much you have investigated that each step will cost. Because the city really wants to understand what you're planning to do and they want to see your vision as best they can, okay? And many times your application will, has to speak for itself. You will not be able to present your ideas to the city in person. If there's a maintenance plan, include that. You will have to include hard and soft costs, your architectural costs, your costs to acquire the property, funding available. There is a slot on the application that asks for funding available for the project. We are trying to figure out how much money you actually have in the bank, but that you do have funding available to do what it is you want to do. The city wants to put these properties in the hands of people who can do what they say they can do, not hold on to them and they continue to deteriorate and become an eyesore to the public. And then also if you can, especially if you're gonna purchase vacant land or even building, if you can do a drawing, it doesn't have to be a drawing that you pay a lot of money for, but just be able to give the city some idea of what it is you want to do visually. You don't need to do that, but just strongly suggest. Again, the purchase process is about 4 to 5 months. We are working with the city to see as best we can to shorten that, because we understand that it's a long time for someone to identify a property and then get it in their hands. But understand it is a process. Once you apply, we go to the city and request their approval to move forward. Many times during that approval process, the city has to look at it even deeper. So it may take a while for us to respond to your application. But anyway, once we receive that application, you will be sent once we receive the approval, and when I say approval, and you will be sent an offer to purchase letter, forgive me. And in that will have the purchase price that the city has agreed it will sell it for. If you get the letter and you say, oh, that's not what you were thinking, you can call that person on that letter and have a conversation about that price. But understand there is a floor that the city has agreed to sell the property for. Once that is agreed upon, you will be sent a purchase agreement that you will have to return to our office, signed and notarized along with your earnest money deposit, which is 10% of the purchase price. Your request to purchase property has to be approved by City Council. And once it is approved by City Council, you will be scheduled a closing and the property will be sold. Oh, 2 minutes, thank you. What should I do prior to the closing date? Secure closing funding, make sure you have your funding available once you receive that letter that we have received the certified council resolution from the council approving your sale. Obtain a title commitment. It is not a requirement, but it is strongly suggested. So this helps you understand what you are purchasing. And the survey of the property is very important because many times people purchase property and they are not clear of what they have actually purchased. Sometimes you look at a building with a lot and you think you're buying the building and the lot. You may be buying the lot, you may be buying the building, you may not be buying both, or you may be buying a portion of the building. Okay, so it is important that you do your due diligence. How are properties sold? Property is sold as is, where is, and with a quitclaim deed. And that is the end of my presentation. If you have any questions, I will go out in the arena. I can't think of the name. And I will be there shortly. I call it arena, I'm sorry, banquet hall.
Yep.
Hall room, thank
hall
you.
room, there you
Hall
go.
room. Again, I thank Council President Jones and Council Member Ayers for having me. And Jerome, I thank you for assisting on the computer. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. And again, just so you all know, we can't add any more chairs to the room. So if you have questions for a particular presenter, you can always follow them right out here into the ballroom so you can get your questions answered. And I do want to acknowledge we've been joined by Kim Tandy, who is well, I was about to say the Don, but the district manager for District 2. Thank you.
Thank you, and let me say good afternoon to everyone. I'm going to ask you, though, if you have a vacant seat, an empty seat next to you, because there are several people that are standing in the back, can you just raise your hand? I see if you raise your hand, we're bringing some more chairs in.
You can't bring any more chairs in.
You cannot bring any around the wall?
So they have to use the chairs that's in here.
Okay. So if you have a seat next to you and someone would like a chair, if you can just raise your hand. There are a few available chairs. And I'm going to want to apologize for my tardiness, and traffic on 90 on the Lodge at this time of day is unbearable. So I want to apologize, but I am here now. And so we're going to continue to move on with the presentations, and I want to also thank you all for being here, and I want to thank the presenters, and I want to thank my colleagues, and I say colleagues, Councilmember Ayers, for us partnering together to present this, and the staff that have helped us, along with, I see also Councilmember McAllister Jr. that I know Member Ayers has already acknowledged, but it's always good to know you have your colleagues that are supporting you in what you are doing. And so this is the district of Councilmember McAllister, so thank you for being here, and thank you all for wanting to help yourself and do better and do business in the city of Detroit. Next, we will have a presentation from Planning and Development Department, along with the Detroit Economic Growth Corporation. And our presenters are Kenyatta Bridges and Joe Tate, and they will be talking about tax incentives and D2D.
Good evening, everyone. I want to thank Council President Brenda Jones and also Council Member Ayers for having us today to be able to speak to everyone about incentives and the things that the DGC is doing. I want to first kind of start by saying you hear a lot about tax abatements and you hear a lot about tax incentives on TV, on the news. You hear people complaining, oh, wow, the city is giving away our tax dollars. But I want to dispel some of those myths, and that the city is not giving away tax dollars, but they're investing in projects that will lead to jobs for Detroiters, that would bring vacant and blighted properties back online, thus increasing the tax revenues for those particular sites, or lead to more housing for Detroiters. So it's not about giving away tax dollars, but it's more about improving the community and providing jobs for the city of Detroit. So I just wanted to kind of start there. And I also want to say that tax abatements are statutorily enabled. Is this the clicker here? Okay. Okay, so property tax abatements are enabled by state statute, right? So it's not that, you know, council get together and sit in a room and say we're going to give these tax dollars away. They're already enabled by state statute. And communities all around Michigan are using these tax abatements to attract jobs and investment to their communities. So it's very, very competitive in terms of how we go out and attract business and how we retain existing businesses. The general eligibility criteria for tax abatements is one that you must have either a blighted property, an obsolete building, or you are looking to expand your existing business. And it could be a small business. Many of you think like, well, it's only for big business. No, it's for the smaller businesses too. The only difference between a smaller business and a big business is the big business pay all these people, these government relations people, to go out and find all the incentives for them, where smaller businesses are, you know, running their business. They don't have time to do that, and they can't afford to pay people hundreds and thousands of dollars to go out and find incentives. And that's where we kind of come in, to come out and meet with you guys, to let you guys know how these incentives work and how you can tap into them. So if you're expanding your business, you can take advantage of it. If you're making infrastructure improvements, you can take advantage of it. And if you're a resident that's located in a neighborhood enterprise zone that's making improvements to your home, and you haven't already exceeded your 15-year limit, you can take advantage of it. So the incentives are available to those who are growing or expanding businesses or are making improvements to houses in neighborhood enterprise zones. The most commonly utilized incentives are really your commercial incentives. So when we look at this list, there's about 6 of them that's on this list. The Commercial Rehab Act is a real popular incentive that's used in and around commercial corridors in the downtown area, because what it does is it allows the owner to pay a reduction in taxes. So you're going to continue to pay the taxes that you would pay on that building prior to making any improvements to that building. You're going to continue to pay those taxes. The city cannot abate those taxes or reduce those taxes. However, the taxes, the improvements that you make to the building, the city can help you out, and they can offer you a reduction in taxes on the improvements that you make to that building for a period of up to 10 years. So that's one that's really used for mostly like mixed use projects. And when I say mixed use, you have commercial on the first level, residential above, or just a commercial structure. In addition to that, we have the commercial facilities exemption. That's really not used that much. I think we just received our second one today as City Council that was approved, that was recommended for approval today, but that's not used that much. You can't use it on, there's certain limitations on it. You can't use it for new construction. You have to use it in a downtown area. So it's very limited on what you can do with that tool, and we've only had 2 of them thus far. The obsolete property rehab is really a good tool for all of these vacant, blighted buildings that you see that's in the city. If you see a vacant, blighted commercial building, you say, hey, I want to purchase that building and I want to put a business in there. There is a tool to help you to offset those taxes so that you can make improvements in that building. It doesn't matter how big or how small that building is. You can take advantage of this incentive as long as the building is deemed obsolete by the assessor's office. And we can demonstrate to the city that there's a net benefit for the city doing this, such as job creation. In addition, we have our industrial facilities exemption certificate, which is used primarily by manufacturers. So you have to have a manufacturing business to take advantage of that. And that provides a 50% reduction in taxes on the new improvements. So most of your larger guys are taking advantage of that, who has manufacturing operations like your Chrysler or someone like that. And then you have a new personal property abatement, which the new personal property abatement is for commercial businesses. And if you have personal property that exceeds $80,000, and it's brand new property to the state of Michigan, you can take advantage of a new personal property exemption. What it does is it allows you to abate all of the taxes on that personal property for a defined period of time. And that one is set by council. So where all of the other ones have a set limitation on how long you can take advantage of it, the new personal property is set by city council. A city council has to make the determination on how long they're willing to let you abate those taxes on your new personal property. But I want to be clear that when we're making recommendations to council, we're not really we're not recommending that council go the full term on any incentive unless it's absolutely necessary. So we look at where the council will receive, where the city will receive their return on that incentive, and where you're going to make money. And we kind of balance the two and say, this is how far the city needs to be in this deal. In addition to that, we have Renaissance zones, which is for really, really big projects. You have to be creating 400 jobs or more to take advantage of a next Michigan development Renaissance zone. So that one is for really large projects. And then the neighborhood enterprise zone is the one where I mentioned that if you're making improvements to your home and you live in a neighborhood enterprise zone, you can take advantage of the tax abatement on that. So I just kind of gave an example on some of how we've used these abatements in some cases. So Detroit Manufacturing Systems, they used the industrial facilities exemption. That was the one I told you that was really for manufacturers. And in order for them to take advantage of it, they had to demonstrate that they were going to create jobs. And they did create more than 600 jobs. And that, the company is located over off Schoolcraft and Evergreen. So they did create more than 600 jobs. Most of their employees are Detroit residents. I want to say at least about 80% of those employees are Detroit residents. And then we utilized it again in the terms of another manufacturer, Verndale Manufacturing, where they agreed to retain 60 jobs, and they created additional jobs, but they went into a facility that had sat vacant for over a decade, and they renovated that facility for new, for their new expansion purposes and to create additional jobs. And again, when we talk about the benefits that result from tax abatements, we're looking at a number of things when we're underwriting these deals, because the DGC is responsible for underwriting all the incentives for the city. And so we're looking at, is this going to create new job opportunities? What's the percentage and what's the likelihood of Detroiters working on those jobs? Is this going to help to remove blight in the neighborhoods? Is it going to lead to reduced costs for the developer, or is it going to lead to reduced costs in housing? So us incentivizing a development project should also allow the developer to provide a reduced rate in the rental rates that he's charging. Is it going to lead to neighborhood improvements? Is it going to increase the tax base? And is it going to improve the quality of life for the residents? And also a big one for me is it going to increase safety? Because a lot of the, when you have vacancy and when you have blight, that kind of becomes a haven for unsolicited activity. So is it going to help improve safety in any kind of way? When we evaluate tax abatements, we look at the but-for analysis. But for this incentive, you can't do this project. So it's not just, okay, everybody come in and get an incentive. It's, I can't do this project without this incentive. And we must demonstrate to council and the mayor's office that this project can't be done without this incentive. So we look at if you're going to be able to make a profit, return on investment, because we know you're not in the business not to make money. We know you have to make some type of money. So we look at if you're going to make a profit, and it's the city going to make a profit from the increase in maybe income tax revenues from hiring residents. So we look at various factors, and we look at, is it a competitive project? Are we competing with another city? Or could you do this someplace else? We look at a host of factors when we're making these analyses. And a part of it is, like I say, jobs created and those wages. Is it a targeted industry, or is it a small business that we're really trying to grow, or is it an area in the city that we're trying to encourage small businesses to open? So we look at a number of factors. And we then provide the City of Detroit, Detroit City Council, and the Mayor's Office with a fiscal benefit analysis, saying this is what you'll have coming in, and this is the amount of tax dollars you will forego. But this is the return on investment. And then the decision is made at the council level to either support that or to not move it forward, right? These are more of kind of like your larger projects, and I just put those on there just so everybody can see. From transparency purposes, I want everybody to know who's getting incentives and what these projects look like. And so one is the 3rd and Grand apartment project down in Midtown or New Center, and the other one was the Flexingate project that's going into the I-94 industrial park. And that's all I have. If anybody has any questions on tax incentives, I'll be right outside, and you can come talk to me, and we can discuss about any projects you may have that you can take advantage of them.
Thank you, Kenyatta. I hope y'all took some good notes, because
That way you can kind of dispel some of the things you hear that's reported inaccurately, so we know what's actually happening. So we're gonna lump the next two together because Rory's that kind of guy. He's got the next two spots. So we're gonna talk about Historic Designation Advisory Board, and then we'll also talk about things from the City Planning Commission, and this is Rory Balder, so he'll be talking to you about the historic designation, tax credits, and also zoning.
And so that you have something you can walk away with, we do have some handouts related to historic districts and related to Historic Designation Advisory Board. Let me pass some of those out so you can follow along with some of the things that I'll be speaking to. Since Ms. Bridges was talking a lot about incentives, you may have noticed in the newspaper that historic locations are in the news. One of the reasons for it is because the Michigan legislature is talking again about having a state tax credit, an historic tax credit. We had that up until 2011 when the economy was pretty rough, and with the new administration coming in, that got dropped along with a number of other tax credits that went along. Now what is looking as if it has a pretty good chance of being reestablished is a 25% tax credit for rehabilitation of historic properties against a state tax bill. I'm going to go into some detail on that related to Senate Bill 469. It's one of the two sheets that you'll be receiving. When we think of historic properties, anybody who's been to Boston, Philadelphia, Washington, you get the sense of historic properties and how you get these cool old buildings where you get a sense of, what was significant in the past. Detroit has historic districts as well. In some instances, they're a single building. In some instances, they're a whole neighborhood. In some instances, they're magnificent structures, and in other instances, they're very humble buildings. Any of those things may be able to qualify for a local historic district, and if the city council votes to establish a property or a neighborhood as a local historic district, it brings with it a number of important things. And looking on the one sheet here where it says reasons to seek local historic designation, we can see some of those. First off, it's a way of having public recognition of architecturally and or historically significant districts. Some buildings, it's not a surprise that they're recognized as architecturally historic and important. You look at the Guardian building and it's wow. A most impressive building, that can stand next to any other building in the United States. Other places, you look at one of the workers' cottages from the 1830s in the old Corktown neighborhood, and it's a pretty humble structure, but it contains a lot of information about how Detroit was originally established. If you go down 14th Street and you find yourself at Marquette and you look at a church which has had better days in terms of upkeep and whatnot, we find out that it's designated as an historic place, as a place where both Martin Luther King and where Malcolm X spoke during the 1960s. So to be recognized by the city as a local historic district means that it's significant in one way or another. Another reason for seeking local historic designation is to ensure that a culturally significant building is preserved for future generations to enjoy. Once a building is designated as a local historic district, it helps preserve against demolition without there having been a lot of serious consternation and consideration ahead of time. If you read the Free Press this morning, you'll notice that City Council just approved the Cass Henry apartment building historic district, and one of the reasons for doing that was to hope that some old apartment buildings close to the Little Caesars Arena that have good strong bones to the buildings but which have sat empty for a good while, that they not be knocked down and that instead that they be rehabbed and reopened, particularly in hopes that folks who have historically lived in that part of the Cass Corridor might be able to return and live there. A third point has to do is to preserve the architectural unity and physical characteristics of a neighborhood while promoting its improvement. We've probably gone through a place like Boston Edison, or maybe the East Indian Village on the east side, or even here, the Grandmont neighborhood. Those are entire neighborhoods that have been designated as local historic districts. And when someone would come in and seek to do alterations to the building, the Historic District Commission actually takes a look at what's being proposed to make sure that it's not wildly out of character with the rest of the area. And lastly, for possible tax benefits available for the rehabilitation of income-producing properties. There are certain national, federal historic tax credits that can be earned for properties that are duly recognized as historic. And if the Senate Bill 469 ends up becoming law, then a significant tax credit would be available. A lot of the detail about how to get a building or a neighborhood or a district designated as historic is included on this sheet right here, and I'm glad to go into more detail on that with you outside after this presentation and the presentation dealing with zoning. I want to spend a couple of minutes on the sheet talking about frequently asked questions about the push to restore Michigan's historic tax credit. This is something that's being considered in Lansing right now, and it would allow for a credit of up to 25% of rehab expenses against state income tax liability. Michigan used to have that. Between 1999 and 2011 we did. Now we're one of only 15 states that doesn't have any kind of a Michigan tax credit. The economic benefits that come with the state historic tax credit, we can see that in a 4-year period when Michigan had that, it spurred private investment of $902 million, ended up having a total economic impact of $1.93 billion, helped create 22,000 jobs. So pretty much for every dollar that was invested in historic properties, there was $11 and some sense of economic impact. How does a building qualify, or project qualify for a tax credit? It has to be part of a local historic district. So someone may in fact have an historic property. I live in a 1892 house down in the Woodbridge neighborhood near Rosa Parks and Forest. It's historic, sure enough, but when it comes down to being eligible for a state tax credit, it's not, because the area of Woodbridge is not something that's zoned, is something that is not locally designated as a local historic district. The neighborhood, now because of this tax bill, this historic tax credit bill, which is up, is looking at that question again to see maybe it would be timely to get the area designated. What the tax credits could be used for everything from repairs on historic homes to large-scale rehab of commercial properties, from office towers to old stores. It would be the only credit available for owner-occupied historic homes. So these are some things which are, particular advantages when it comes to having a property actually officially designated as historic. Now, my part of the presentation is to talk both about this historic designation aspect, but also the zoning ordinance. The office that I come from, which is part of the Legislative Policy Division, we have both the City Planning Commission as well as the Historic Designation Advisory Board. And between those two staffs, we're the ones who send Council President Jones and Council Member Ayers and Council Member McAllister probably the bulk of the laws that they pass in any given year. The majority of laws that council members take up are things that come through our office, either because something is being considered for historic designation or because somebody has requested as a rezoning, a change in zoning maps, or a change in the text of a zoning ordinance. And to get into some detail in terms of what we mean when we're talking about the zoning ordinance, I've got another stack of handouts that you can walk away with that I'm going to pass out now.
So you see, Mr. Bolger comes prepared with stuff for you to walk away with.
We've been accused of killing forests with all the pages that we reproduce. You hear about zoning. It's not something that comes up every day, but it's one of those facts of life that if you've been trying to get a permit for something, the aspect of zoning is important. It's something that that matters in terms of whether or not you're going to get a permit. Zoning is about 100 years old. Detroit is about 300 years old. Detroit has had a zoning ordinance since 1940, decades and decades before any of us were around. But Detroit got built back, a couple hundred years ago. There were, the first businesses set up largely along waterways, either Detroit River or the Rouge River, and then along railroad lines, 1840s, 1850s. After the Civil War, you got railroads being built, and that's where businesses aggregated. Well, what we find out is all of that kind of development took place. That was the end of the 1800s, the first part of the 1900s. 1917 or so, Detroit finally stopped expanding, never did get Highland Park and Hamtramck, but it picked up parts of Gratiot Township and parts of Redford Township and Dearborn Township and different, different areas around the city that comprise the city limits right now. But it wasn't until 1940 that the city actually got down and prepared maps that showed every single block of the city, and it made sure that every block in the city had a particular designation. Why have zoning at all? Well, to figure that out, you got to go back, look at some American history. If you've been to New York, if you know the Lower East Side of New York, that's the part of the Eastern Seaboard where tens of thousands of immigrants came in, lived in tenement buildings, lived oftentimes in very crowded conditions. And some of the earliest tenement laws passed by the city of New York ended up being the basis for eventual zoning laws. These were laws that were adopted to regulate the use or the development of land in a way that would promote and protect public health, safety, and general welfare. Originally, what that meant is trying to make sure that you didn't have people living so close to each other and buildings built so close to each other that it blocked the passage of light and air and fostered an unhealthy environment. From that, zoning has evolved considerably so that now it deals not only with those matters of health and safety, but also gets into issues of quality of life and aesthetics. The zoning ordinance, which in Detroit, I didn't bring it because it's 800 pages. It was heavy. But some of you will have copies of parts of the ordinance. It consists of two things. There are 78 maps, which consist of the entirety of the city of Detroit. Well, some of you will be getting a copy of map number 59. 59 is the part of the map, the part of the city of Detroit, which includes Northwest Activity Center. And if your eyesight is really good, you can look at this and you'll notice that on every single block within this area, bounded by Curtis on the north, Livernois on the east, Fenkel on the south, and Myers on the west, every block has a particular designation. It might be B2. B stands for business. 2 means it's a local business and residential area, or it might be R1, a single-family residential area. In fact, that's what the majority of the blocks in this part of the northwest side are zoned. And if you can squint really good, you may have seen something like this at your optometrist. Trying to see, you can make out the wording on there. The zoning maps are supposed to be based on the city's master plan. Yes, indeed, the city has a master plan. The state requires that any locality that's going to regulate land use and is going to have a zoning ordinance, you have to have a master plan to guide how land is zoned. And so the inside of this wrapper, if you've got one of those copies, is a section of the master plan for this area, referred to as Neighborhood Cluster 10, the Bagley area. And on that map, it'll indicate what areas, what the vision of the city of Detroit is for a particular area. And it may indicate certain areas should be commercial, certain areas should be residential, certain areas should be low-density residential, meaning just have single-family houses and maybe some duplexes. Other areas should be higher-density residential, have apartment buildings, have some medium-rise buildings or have mixed-use kinds of buildings. And so if you were to look in the zoning ordinance, you'd find that this particular master plan area for the city is divided among 4 different maps, one of which is included in many of these handouts. Local historic designation, which we were just talking about, that's separate from zoning. It's authorized under separate state laws, but you can see it on zoning maps. If an area is designated as historic, the area will be indicated with dots on the map. Rezonings of land should generally be consistent with the Detroit Master Plan. And one of the bread and butter activities of the City Planning Commission is to look at requests that people have to change the zoning of the land from one classification to another. We made mention of the master plan. You can look at the area up there where it shows cluster 10, master plan area 10, which is not to be confused with the council districts. This is a separate kind of classification. And you'll notice the area referred to as Bagley, that's the area that includes Northwest Activity Center. And each of the master plan subsectors will indicate on the map what the recommended future land use is for a particular area. So if somebody says, we really need to have a trucking facility in the area, something where you're able to have a truck terminal or something like that, and we notice that the zoning ordinance prohibits that kind of a land use in most every zoning district unless it's zoned industrial or a general services B6 zoning district. If somebody were to come in and say, I really want to operate a trucking terminal out of this area, let's say along 7 Mile or along McNichols, one of the first things that we would do is look at the master plan. What's being suggested for it? If what somebody is suggesting, let's say to upgrade an area into more of an industrial character, if that's what the master plan is indicating, that would tend to support what their request is. In this kind of instance, our response would be generally, there's uphill climbs and then there's real uphill climbs. And that would be the instance, for example, if somebody wanted to put in a trucking facility of some sort in an area such as this, because none of the areas within this part of the master plan, and when you look at the zoning ordinance, none of the areas are zoned for warehouse and freight movement or industrial kinds of development. And in all likelihood, if someone decided to pursue that kind of a rezoning, it would end up being with a recommendation from staff to the commissioners, such as to Commissioner Wbe, who's sitting here. We would recommend that it's not consistent with the master plan and recommend that the rezoning not take place. The zoning ordinance maps, this is what they look like if you didn't get a copy of the map that was passed out. Every single block in the city has a zoning district classification, one classification or another. So the maps are 78 pages of the ordinance. The other 750 pages are text. And the text of the ordinance specifies the land uses that are permitted in each of the 29 zoning district classifications. So there's about 350 different land uses that are actually called out in the zoning ordinance. Now, if you have a copy of this stapled handout that I have right here, this is the use table for the ordinance. That's got all 350 of them. So if you're thinking of going into business, you want to look at this and you want to see, okay, what kind of land use label fits what I want to do. And then you want to see which zoning districts that land use is permitted in. So one of the key things that the zoning ordinance does, and one of the key purposes for zoning, going all the way back to Calvin Coolidge and Herbert Hoover, was to segregate incompatible land uses. Now, you don't want a house right next to a factory because of, or let's say to something that has some negative offsite impacts, either a lot of vibration, a lot of noise, a lot of odor. Yet that's exactly what we have in a lot of places in Detroit. Why? Because the zoning maps didn't get established till 1940. The factories and heavy business got established decades before that, and people had to go to work. And so neighborhoods, like in the Jefferson-Chalmers area where I lived for 30 years, you had what was the Chrysler-Jefferson plant and a few other automotive facilities, but then you had Connor, Tennessee, Clare Point, Tennessee, Navajo, all of these streets in that area through there where workers' housing was built because people had to walk to work or take a short bus ride to get to work. Not the healthiest situation, but it's what we got. The idea behind having different zoning classifications is to group together uses that would be viewed as compatible. The zoning ordinance also will indicate in certain instances whether or not a building should be set back from the property line, whether or not it can go 35 feet in height, or if it could go 80 feet in height, or if it should just be a story and a half or something like that. So those are all the kinds of issues that come up with the text of the zoning ordinance. The zoning ordinance also specifies if you're a business or other kind of land use, if you have an apartment building, if you have a house, how much off-street parking do you need for your business? And this is a place where oftentimes people may run into an issue trying to get a permit to open up a new business, and building and safety say, you don't have enough parking. You're supposed to have 35 parking spaces and you got 2. And instances like that are what oftentimes will delay issuance of a permit, because in that kind of a situation, somebody may need to go to the Board of Zoning Appeals and present their case why having only 2 parking spaces off space is not going to be a problem in the area for that particular business. Well, you can imagine anytime that kind of decision-making takes place, which involves the community, because any decision made by the Board of Zoning Appeals for a variance, for example, such as for parking, requires notice of everybody within 300 feet and inviting them down to a public hearing to comment on whether or not the requested variance would be permissible. Land uses, again, if you look back at this use table right here, you'll see that there are a number of letters that show up in the various columns. The columns are the zoning districts, R1, R2, R3, R4, R5, R6. R stands for residential. B1 through B6. B stands for business. Industrial, M stands for manufacturing. The higher the number, the more intensive, the busier the kind of activity. R1, single-family zoning district. R6, think of the Gold Coast along East Jefferson, east of Belle Isle. You get some fairly high-rise apartment buildings through there. B2 zoning district. Think of much of West McNichols. A lot of that is just kind of, 1- and 2-story storefronts. B5, think of downtown. B6, think of Eastern Market. So you get different kinds of development, and then any of the M zones An M1 district may only permit certain kinds of industrial or freight activities, but an M4 or an M5 district allows the Marathon refinery. So you get all sorts of variations there. Each of the cells on this use table will either be blank, it'll have the letter R in it, or the letter C. If it says R, it means that the land use is permitted by right. By right means that the city council has already determined that that land use is permissible in the given zoning district. So, not surprisingly, if the land is zoned R1 or R2 or R3 or R4 or R5, the use table says that a single-family dwelling is permissible by right. To be able to get a permit for a land use which is permitted by right, all you have to do is be able to demonstrate that you've satisfied any of the off-street parking requirements, any of the height requirements or lot coverage requirements. You pay your money, you get your permit. You'll also see that some are indicated as C. C stands for conditional. And that's City Council's way of saying this land use may be appropriate, it may not be appropriate, but the neighbors need to know. And anything which is listed as conditional prompts and requires the Building Safety Engineering and Environmental Department to send out notice to everybody within 300 feet of that property that such and such a thing is being proposed. You are invited down to a special land use hearing at the building department. A lot of times it'll be on a Thursday morning or a Wednesday morning. And you're invited to offer your comment as to the appropriateness of that land use in that particular area. The hearing officer takes all of the comments into consideration and submits a recommendation to the director of the Building Safety Engineering and Environmental Department, who then will either say, yes, you are eligible for a zoning grant, which likely has any number of conditions attached to it. Yep, you can operate, but you can't operate between 11 p.m. and 7 a.m. Yes, you can operate, but you have to have a certain kind of masonry wall built in a particular area to protect the nearby neighbor. Yes, you can operate, but you have to abide by a particular condition. Anyone who is aggrieved, anybody who's dissatisfied with that decision from the director of the building department can appeal the decision to the Board of Zoning Appeals. So if I'm the applicant and I want to open up a used car lot on a portion of East 8 Mile or West 8 Mile, which is Zone B4, and the building department says, I can take that decision to the Board of Zoning Appeals and plead my case again. That triggers another notification to everybody within 300 feet, another hearing, and the Board of Zoning Appeals can hear that again. Let's say the building department grants me approval for the used car lot, and I'm the block club president who appeared at the hearing and said, it doesn't make sense in this area. We're trying to develop a walkable area, and this is just gonna be one more area where there's no buildings there. It doesn't add, in this instance, to the particular community, and the community organization can request that the issue be heard again and that the Board of Zoning Appeals can overturn that decision. So that's what a conditional use is. What's it mean if there's nothing in there at all, if it's neither R nor C? Can't do it. It's prohibited. So for instance, right on the first page, you'll see adult foster care facility. And what's implied is that this would be an adult foster care facility for 7 or more individuals. The zoning ordinance doesn't allow it to be established on land zoned R1 or R2. So the answer, if somebody comes forward with that kind of a permit application, the building department says, no, you're not eligible. And that may trigger somebody either to try and get the land rezoned, which again is going to be dependent on whether or not the master plan supports it and whether or not the planning commissioners see that it's appropriate and city council passes an ordinance to change the maps, or they may decide, oh, okay, I need to find some land zoned R3, R4, R5, or R6, or B1 or B2. So we see how this This use table that you have is kind of the Rosetta Stone to the zoning ordinance. That contains a bulk of the information that's contained in the other 800 pages. There can be adjustments and variances made to what the zoning ordinance specifies. Things such as intensity and dimensional standards. Those are the height limitations, the setback requirements, the ground coverage requirements. The building department has authority to consider whether or not a 10% modification would be appropriate. Anything more than that has to go to hearing at the Board of Zoning Appeals. Same way if there are particular use regulations or development standards. When it comes down to rezonings, that goes to City Planning Commission, to the office that I work for, and to the City Council itself. You've heard of grandfathered in uses, non-conforming uses. If zoning didn't get established till 1940, but there are lots of buildings that were around before then, some of those uses were legal at the time that they were established, but are prohibited today. All of the strip clubs on 8 Mile, non-conforming. Adult uses and sexually oriented businesses didn't get regulated until after they were already established. Those are already deemed to be grandfathered in uses and are no longer allowed to expand. Other kinds of non-conforming uses could be able to expand or change from one non-conforming use to another, but not without a hearing before the Board of Zoning Appeals. Violations and enforcement are taken care of by the building department. If you have concern about how land is being used, you think it may be in violation of zoning, 628-2451 is who you want to call. That's where you would lodge a complaint about zoning, and inspectors are pledged to go out within 24 hours. If you've got questions about zoning, that's me. Give me a call, 224-3219, or in general, the number is 224-6225. I'll be outside and glad to answer any specific questions that you may have.
So next, we are going to hear from the Department of Public Works. The Department of Public Works, Mr. Doherty, is going to talk about the fire site improvements and the street easement.
Good evening, everyone. Council members Ayers, Jones, thank you for having this event today, and of course, thank you all for being here. I hate to be talking to an empty room, and I'm happy to see that you all care so much about your city and want to build a better future. As Councilmember Jones indicated, my name is Richard Doherty. I'm the city engineer for the city of Detroit. My division is a part of the Department of Public Works. There are several divisions within the Department of Public Works. The Solid Waste Division manages the contracts to pick up your trash. They also go out and clean dump sites. They sweep the residential streets now. They added that program last year to their responsibilities. Our Street Maintenance Division goes out, they place coal patch, they resurface, lay down asphalt in about 50 miles of residential streets a year. They plow the snow, sweep the commercial streets, clean the viaducts, etc. Our Traffic Engineering Division puts up street signs, manages the traffic signals in the city. And my division, the City Engineering Division, I like to think we're the stewards of the public right-of-way. And the right-of-way, generally in a residential neighborhood, it's from a foot behind the sidewalk that's next to the curb, across the street to a foot behind the other sidewalk. So that space in between is where the water department can put their sewers, their water mains, gas company can put their gas main, and the like. Also the alleys behind homes carries a lot of the utilities as well. So we manage and permit work within the public right-of-way. So if you want to place a dumpster out in front of your business or house, you need to pull a dumpster permit. If you want to put in a new curb or driveway or replace sidewalk, you need to pull a right-of-way permit for that. If you're doing heavy construction, you're moving large construction equipment, either really overweight loads or too wide of loads, those permits come to our office. And our permits office is at 313-224-3935. How to apply for permits are on the city website. Just go to the How Do I lines and you'll find the way to our permits section. We also manage a lot of construction within the public right-of-way. I mentioned we partner with the Street Maintenance Division. They'll resurface the street. We will hire a contractor to mill off the old asphalt, replace seriously damaged curb, adjust the catch basins and manholes so that they line up with the new asphalt that goes down, improve the ADA handicap ramps, and do some sidewalk repair. So that program alone is 50 miles of residential streets. There isn't a city in the state that reaches in the neighborhoods that does the type of work we do. It's one of the proudest programs I'm a part of. I was a city engineer in Warren. I think we resurfaced 1 mile in my 9 years there. Here we do 50 miles a year. We're touching neighborhood after neighborhood, year after year. We're resurfacing 30 miles of major roads this year. So in total, we're probably close to 100 miles of paving that we're doing this year. We're also doing quite a bit of sidewalk work, more than we've ever done.
Richard, repeat that, because people don't believe that we touch sidewalks and roads. You gotta repeat that. That's some
Yes.
good information.
We do sidewalks, and you can call 224-3947 with sidewalk complaints, or just type into email address sidewalkcomplaints@detroitmi.gov if you have something you want us to look at. And we do try to prioritize. We want to definitely get to the worst first, but we do want to try to fix as much as we can to make the city walkable again. So that's just some of the programs we do, and we bid out all that work. Contractors work for us. If you're in construction, we'd love to have you put in a bid. Boise will tell you about the process for doing that. And we have a couple more coming out this year, some of our what we call Class C streets without curb and gutter, just asphalt over the old gravel roads. We're paving several miles of those again, and then we're crack sealing roads we may have paved a few years ago. We want to seal those cracks that are developing so we can keep the water out and extend the life of the pavement. What's on the agenda is about making improvements or using the, apologize.
It's $5, Richard.
Yeah. Kids. Anybody have kids? I'll talk to him later. So anyways, if you have a building, oftentimes like downtown, the building is right to the right-of-way line. It's actually required, as Rory mentioned, zoning, it requires the buildings be built right to the right-of-way line. So if a building wants to hang a sign, place an awning, all of a sudden they're reaching into the public right-of-way to make those improvements, and they need to file a petition at the city clerk's office, and then we process that petition, investigate it, reach out to all the utilities and make sure there's no conflicts with what you're trying to do to your building, so that if you want to use our right-of-way for this purpose, we will then process a petition. The council will hold the public hearing to decide if that investment is in the public's interest, and they will allow the use then of our right-of-way for that investment you're making on your property. It's, every building downtown has a footing, and it's, if there's a basement or below its basement, and that footing stretches out into our right-of-way. So just about every building downtown has to do it. If you want to do anything from like an outdoor cafe, like Central Kitchen has that whole kind of structure that's in our right-of-way, that we had to vet that, check with all the utilities, and send it to council for their consideration if that was something that would improve the community at large. So we process all those, and if you want a street closed temporarily for 5 years or permanently vacated, an alley vacated, we process those petitions as well. If you think you can use the alley, oftentimes there may be something in that alley or in that road that has a right to be there now because of the public right-of-way, and if you want to build over it, then you may have to pay to move the water main or move the sewer to make that kind of a heavier investment. But if you are just looking to, if you have an alley in your backyard, planning department, PDD processes those. If you want to just move your fence lines and get rid of that alley and make it part of your backyard, they'll process those. We do it when it's like at the end of the block between a commercial property and a residential property. And our petitions, those petitions, like I said, they all go to City Council. But at my office at 313-224-3970, we'll be able to guide you through that process, show you the how do you do it so that you can make the investments you want to make and improve your neighborhood and maybe use a little bit of our right-of-way to do it in a way that is a benefit to the community. So that's all I have. I won, I think, didn't I? All right.
All right. And you all, let me just be, Yep. And again, everybody will be at their tables. If you do have questions you want to leave out right now, ask questions. But I do want you all to understand the reason that we're giving you so much information from so many of these different departments. You may be sitting here like, this don't apply to me. But it all applies to all of us, because whether it is the business that you want to start or the industry that you're in, or it's information for a business that may be in your neighborhood that is doing more than what they're allowed to do, then So this knowing is more than half the battle, right? So, and then every person that we've had come up here, they utilize contractors. So it may not be an industry you ever thought about getting into, but the need is there. And the need is there for people that look like all of us, that are of the same gender as me. We have a lot of open spaces where we know that we have the people in the city to fill those vacancies. Right, so who do we have up next? We have Building Safety, Environmental and Engineering Department, which you probably hear us refer to as BC. There's so many alphabets around this place. And Kevin Jones actually is going to do the presentation about licensing and the permit process. Oh, I can give you a shout out. I'm sorry, I didn't know. That's so much paper.
We put a little spin on it here. I hope you don't mind, Councilwoman.
No.
The whole presentation won't entail of just licensing and permits, but we'll kind of give you an overview of our whole department. As you know, Buildings and Safety is a very large department that is comprised of multiple divisions: dangerous buildings, construction, licensing and permits, zoning, just to name a few. My name is Kevin Jones, and I'm the manager of the Licensing and Permits Division. The department operates under the direction of David Bell. I don't want to miss that point. He's not here tonight. I learned the hard way. I didn't announce that last time. And our motto is to get everybody to the finish line. I have to make sure I say that. So we're very excited. We got a lot of exciting things going on at Buildings and Safety. I've been working in this department for 10 years. These gentlemen have been here longer than I have, and I think we will all agree that this department is operating more efficiently than it has in previous years. We are not perfect, but we are definitely on the path to get to the most efficient and the most customer-friendly processes that we can. So what I want to do tonight is, from a licensing and permit standpoint, is just kind of share with you what it is that I'm in charge of and the things that we have going on in my particular division. And before I do so, I want to share two of the things that are going on department-wide. One, the department is in the process of implementing a queue-list system. You all may have been to the Secretary of State and have used the sign-in process where you supply your cell phone number and you are given the opportunity to roam about freely, go and handle other business, and you'll receive a text message letting you know that you're ready to be served. Well, we're implementing that on the 4th floor. Again, there's multiple divisions in Buildings and Safety. You may have more number of business you need to get done on the 4th floor or even throughout the building. By using this queue-list system, you'll be able to sign in on the 4th floor and go about the building or wherever you may need to go to handle your other business and still receive that text message when it's time for you to be serviced on the 4th floor. So we think that's a game changer. We're very excited about that. The second thing is we are implementing a new software Our old software was a little bit outdated, and we're implementing later this year a software by the name of Accela. That's ACCELA. And this software is going to allow you to do things such as applying for your licenses and permits online, setting up inspections online, communicating backdoor with some of the employees from the back end, being able to see the results of your inspections online, not necessarily having to call, you can see it real time, and paying those fees online as well. So again, we believe this is another game changer. We're trying to get away from all the paper and so forth and become as paperless as possible. So we believe, again, that this is also going to be a big thing for the department and prove to be customer friendly as well. So back to my division here, in licensing and permits, I'm sorry. Business licensing, why do I need a license? So certain businesses, in order to make sure that businesses are operating fairly, safely, and in a clean manner, these businesses have been deemed by City Council and the Mayor's office to require a certificate of license in order to operate within the city limits. That license allows my department, my division, to pretty much kind of govern, if you will, those businesses. Ordinances are drafted that kind of, we call them the Bible for each business type that we license, and that is what these businesses are to govern, that's how they're supposed to govern themselves. Which businesses require a license? I'll name a few. The rest can be found online. Obviously, if you go to City of Detroit's website, go to Buildings and Safety, and you go to, all of our divisions are listed there. If you go to licensing and permits, you'll find a list of all the businesses that require a certificate of license. Just a few to name here. Restaurants, obviously, the health portion of it is important. Rental halls, valet operations, hotels, anything with public lodging, we want to make sure that obviously they're being maintained in a clean fashion. Gas stations, anything secondhand in nature, tires, cars, furniture, anything secondhand we govern. Sexually oriented businesses, the strip clubs and so forth. And more recently here are medical marijuana facilities, just to name a few. Again, you can find a full list. Hopefully we don't have any questions about that tonight. You can find a full list online there. How do you go about obtaining a business license? It's pretty simple. We have a set of requisite documents that have to be submitted to our office. We're going to need proof of property ownership, a lease agreement or a deed showing you own the property. We can't just license you if you have no right to be there, obviously. We need your ID, that type of thing and whatnot. A couple other things, DBA, your LLC, whatever it may be. The fee, the non-refundable license fee has to be remitted. And then we have a set of requisite inspections that have to be done to ensure that the building gets up to code. Obviously, we don't want anything bad to happen while you're occupying that space to yourself or the public. Licenses are renewed on an annual basis. Before any licensing can be done, it's very important to note that legal use must be established. So you can't come to me to apply for a license for a restaurant if the legal use of said location is a barbershop. You have to go to zoning. Zoning always comes before licensing. I always recommend to anybody, before you put any money in any building or anything, always go and do your homework, look up that address, see if any monies are owed, see what the legal use is, make sure that what it is that you're proposing can be done at that address. Not everything can be done at every location. We're not going to put certain uses right next to an adjacent use. So again, always do your homework before putting any money in any building and so forth. And lastly, some of the requisite inspections that are needed in order to get a license are our fire department, our health department, our property maintenance department. We also look for property tax and income tax clearances as well. Just wanted to make a note of that. Property tax currently looks for any outstanding fees due throughout the whole city before they'll issue a clearance for a business license. Lastly, I just want to share a couple of process improvements that we've made at licensing and permits. Obviously, this is the most important thing, again, trying to be customer friendly. We listened to the businesses and we made a few changes. We have heard that in the past, any violation in the past would have held up a business license, no matter the degree of egregiousness of the violation. Well, now we've made it where only life-threatening violations will hold up a business license. So if property maintenance was to go out and maybe see a crack in the wall, well, that will hold up their certificate of compliance. It won't necessarily hold up the business license. They can still clear you and allow you to go on and continue to do business, even though you still have to comply with something on their end, and they have their own means for gaining compliance. It will not necessarily hold up a business license. A sign, for instance, if there's an issue with your sign outside, we don't want to put you out of business because of a sign. That's not nothing that's life-threatening. So we felt that that was very big. We also heard that people were being cited for a set of violations, A, B, and C, only to fix those issues and have an Inspector B come out and cite them for E, F, and G, things that weren't on the original report. We've heard that as well. We're doing our best to send that same inspector back out, but if he can't come out, he is only going back out on that re-inspect with regards to those initial violations that were found in the initial inspection. The certificate of compliance comes from our property maintenance division. In the past, that was required on an annual basis. We have now moved that certificate of compliance to every 2 years. You receive that from the property maintenance division. Other than that, our last thing here, and this is not our MO, but obviously we are equipped with an enforcement mechanism. I have 7 licensed investigators that do work out in the field. These gentlemen, again, their first course of action, again, is to educate and notify the businesses. If you are to get a visit from one of these guys, they're kind of big in size, if you will, don't be intimidated. They're there to help you, believe it or not. It's not our MO to put anybody out of business. However, they're gentle giants. They're actually big babies. But again, our thing is we are looking for compliance. We have to gain compliance, and we want to make it a level playing field for everybody. So if we're allowing one person to go and conduct business outside of their purview, then it's not a level playing field for the rest of the businesses. So again, we're educating, we're notifying, we're warning. We are equipped with the ability to wipe misdemeanor violations that are adjudicated at 36th District Court. If we can't gain compliance there and problems persist, we also have a mechanism known as the show cause process, in which we can actually bring an owner in and hold him accountable for the actions that are happening at or around his business. And again, it's not our first thing to put him out of business. We're looking to come to an agreement, say, hey, what can you do to fix these things? We usually are able to enter an agreement, and those things are curtailed. But if we cannot, we are obviously equipped with the ability to revoke and suspend business licenses as well. That's all I have from a licensing standpoint. Again, this is Bob DiBerardino. He's from construction. If you have any questions for him or myself, we'll be outside at our table. Also, Arthur Edge is here from Dangerous Buildings. I'm sure you probably all know him. He'll also be joining me over at the building and safety table if you have any further questions for any of us. Appreciate you all.
I'm sorry, everybody. I just want to quickly acknowledge Tammy Daniels from, that's your last name, isn't it? Okay. Whew. I don't know my last name right now. I'm sorry. From the Detroit Land Bank. And so I asked for her to be here so that she can see how many people we do have that are trying to get into different elements of business in the city. Because Land Bank, they're interested in trying to bring folks into the fold too. So.
And then also acknowledge Arthur Edge. Arthur Edge, one of the supervisors, when you talk about demolition and all of that stuff down there, he is also part of building safety, engineering, and environment. So now we come to a very, 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 very important part, and that is from our purchasing department, and the director there is none other than Mr. Boise Jackson himself. He is going to talk about the City of Detroit procurement process and the equalization credits.
Yeah, good afternoon. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. All right, that's great. Appreciate it.
I'm not saying that because it's evening.
Good evening. Yeah, it feels like afternoon to me, so I'm still fired up. Hey, as Council President said, I want to walk you through some things in contract number procurement. I also want to talk to you about the open bid opportunities that are out there. Council President Jones and Councilwoman Ayers constantly challenge us to hire Detroiters, mentor companies, ensure we got a good and a solid contract before we even bring it to them for approval. But I want to share a few things with you today. We do have a table outside of here As Councilwoman Ayers said, we got a lot of documentation we want to leave with you that's got contacts for each one of our services or goods. If you're looking for a contract in janitorial services, I'm going to talk about that in a moment, then we have a contact for you that you can talk to. If you have fuel, if you have catering, if you have supplies, we have this in this brochure. So all of you should at least utilize that. I do want to identify two of my people in the back, Renee and Sandra, raise your hand, as well as some others out there. Because we in the city, City Council and Administration, we have also put in some systems, and it don't cost you a dime to see contracts in the city, okay? It don't cost you a dime. About 5 or 6 of you asked me outside, boys, how much do we have to pay to see a bid? The answer is 0. So please, please, and we are prepared outside to get you signed up before you leave here so that you can start seeing bids tomorrow, okay? So please take us up on that and work my ladies fairly hard. To begin with, we have various governing rules and regulations in contracting and procurement. We got federal laws, state laws, charters, but the primary thing is we operate on a city ordinance, and it requires us to have all contracts go to City Council for approval. That's 25,000 and greater. I don't approve contracts. I make recommendations to council, and if the recommendations are solid enough, and yes, they challenge me on those, then they will get approved, okay? So that's the way it works, and you can, this information is out there for you to share, okay? How to do business with the City of Detroit. First thing, if you have a business that you're interested in getting into, you got to market your goods and service, okay? You got to make sure it is a good, viable business to get into, right? You can't be in the fleet business and think you want to do catering, okay? Because that's going to show out, and then we're going to start asking you questions on it. But I think you get the point. You must meet the department's requirements. If they have a delivery on asphalt once a week or twice a week, that's what they want. You can't just say you're going to deliver it once a month. So, so make sure you understand that. Read and understand the bid solicitation. A lot of people just skim over it, and we spend a lot of time going through it. If you have any questions, please always ask. Council asked me, so you know, as I ask you, these two on the left here would definitely challenge something that they feel is not right. But that's what they should do. I should be able to submit to them, along with you, a good, solid contract that is worthy of the taxpayer spending their money on, right? That's what we should do. But make sure you understand what the bid solicitation is saying, and then ensure clearances and affidavits are updated, okay? And last but not least, you got to perform when you get it. I won't go through all of these, but we have some required documents. Outside, we're prepared to talk to you about all of these, okay? So on the area that says contract and procurement, you need to make sure of anything that you got your income tax and your property tax clearances valid before it goes to council. I get murdered if one of my people wind up sending something there and I haven't done my due diligence. Everybody picks on council for that, but that's not their fault. It's me for not preparing and making sure, me and the tax office, that we have vetted that before it gets to them.
Can you repeat that? It's not our fault?
It's not your fault. It is me. So when they push back on something because the taxes weren't looked at, that's the administration's fault. That's my fault for not even allowing it to go to council in the first place with that problem, okay? The other thing is make sure your insurance certificate, and if you need bonds on certain things, please make sure you got that taken care of as well, okay? Okay, what are the business issues around contracting? Make sure you meet specifications and timing. Confirm your delivery requirement. If you doing work, submit your invoices. We don't manually drop off invoices in the city anymore. Our terms are net 30, and we have been working hard in getting people paid on time. If any of you have a payment issue or know someone that has a payment issue, I want to personally know it. You can upload your invoices from home now or any place in your business into what we call a supplier portal, and you can actually see when the payment is going to be made. So you don't have to call up anyone and say, hey, when am I going to get paid? You can go online and see that, okay? And we put the system in over the last couple of years with city council support, and we're gonna keep riding on this. Know where the key players in your activity are and manage your business and customers. Underscore the manage piece because in many cases, as I handle the entire city, I see situations where a company subcontracts it to someone else to get the work done, someone that you hired, but when the subcontractor don't do their job, you tell them, say, boys, they don't do their job, so I can't do my job. You hired them, okay? So you got to make sure you need and have some good people working for you and against you. But also on the flip side of that, if you have a high absentee problem, or if you feel you can't do something on time, tell us. We know you're human. If you're gonna miss an asphalt delivery, if you're doing a rehab on a home and you can't get it done to meet the department's expectations, or if you are doing elevator maintenance, fleet maintenance, or any number of things we have in the city, then tell us ahead of time that you got a problem and we'll work through the issue with you. And that's the emphasis I want to make sure you understand. So tell us. The city strongly encourages minority, women, and veterans in our bid on city procurements. I'm going to show you statistics in a minute. We're a long ways from being where I feel personally we could be. And I need your help in getting the word out that we want to do more. We are looking at goals. City Council President has challenged me with a percentage in terms of contractor for Detroit-based or Detroit headquartered business. Every week she asks me about that. I wish she forgets sometime, but she always talks to us about where you at on the percentage that we're trying to do. We're going to roll that out. There's a few things we got to get done first before we do, but know that this whole idea and look at diversity, we are cognizant of the fact and we are working on fixing that, okay? Let me talk to you a little bit about some advantages you can take advantage of if you want to do business with the city. Portia Roberson just came in. Portia is the Director of Civil Rights, Inclusion, and Opportunity. Her organization certified the businesses, and when someone gets certified, we utilize that in our contracting process for scoring, okay? There are Detroit-based, Detroit small business, Detroit headquartered business, DBE, Detroit resident, minority, and women. And Portia's also got a Detroit startup certification. They work in their area as well, which to me has been a new one and a good one. It's only a couple of $100, $250, I think, within less than 2 years for $250,000 or less, okay? So all in all, we're looking at ways that we can engage people very soon on into the process, and you don't have to be in the business for 10 years. Tammy also from the Land Bank is looking at some of the different things over there. They too support the diversity item. Now, this is in your package and will be outside. And the point that I'm making, if you are a Detroit-based business and you can have $10,000 or less, let's say you've got a business for $8,000. So I'm making it real simple. You get a 5% credit, and I'll explain it more specific in a moment. And also, if you're based in the city of Detroit, you get another 3%. You can get 8 to 15% in terms of how the math works, and you will get the contract. A company outside of the city of Detroit, case in point, bid something for $1,000, okay? Your bid was $1,009. You will get the business if you have the associated credits through Portia's area. Everybody with me here? So we encouraging the use of the certifications, seeing the Creole department, and again, we have a table. Portia has a table out here as well. So please stop by there for more explanation on that if you haven't done so already, okay? Now, we have about 1.6 million, 1.7 million in contracts if you're taking a look at 2017. You can't see this over to the right-hand side, but it shows you that if you look at this whole piece of the pie, it looks like a piece of cheese to me, actually. But if you look at the pie or the piece of cheese, the areas over here are the piece of it that goes to Detroit-based businesses, women businesses, minority businesses, headquarter business. Okay, so what we want to do with your help and your interest in small businesses, we want to be able to carve out a little more of this pie, cheese. Okay, so that's what I'm trying to reflect there. We've got a long way to go. If you look at the certified businesses, a little less than 700,000, and as I indicated there, if you take all of those pieces of cheese that we talked about earlier, if you take all these pieces right here and just put them around you, it equates to what that is. So that piece of the cheese, we need to really, really do more on. And if you look at, women businesses and minority businesses, it's pretty indicative of where we are. And so if you take women business, 34 million of the 658 million, that's a small percentage, right? And I know we got other women companies, and I've met a few tonight that I think can help bid on our contracting, okay? Now, let me talk to you about what are real bid opportunities, and I want to leave you with this. These are the bids. My team have them out here in black and white on the desk to get it. But one of the main ones that we got coming up here in the next few weeks are janitorial services for our Rosa Parks terminal and for our bay washing in the Department of Transportation, okay? Can any of you see that in the back at all? You probably can't. Can you see it? Okay. We've got tree removal services. Seems like trees are always falling in the city of Detroit for whatever reason. But if you're interested in bidding on that, you can see over to the right, and when you get outside the door, talk to my team, see Renee, see Sandra. We can talk more to you about the specifics of the bid, okay? But I want to talk to you about that. Gentlemen talked to me about rehab. Rehab in homes is coming up as well. Abatement and demolition. Security service contracts are coming back up for renewal. If you're in the moving services, truck route studies, demolition services, aviation fuels, bus stop signs, fiduciary administration services, and the other chart that I don't think we put, yeah, here it is. Additional opportunities is a little tough to look at, but you've given a handout. So she gave you a handout on some of those. So please look at these bid opportunities and please help me. We talked about janitorial transit center, emergency shelter contracts. There's some technology ones in here. Asphalt pumps, oil, lubricating oils, disposal of dead animals contracts, bus stop decals, pre-stenciled bus stop signs, etc. So my point to you tonight is that there are a lot of things that are out on bid currently, as well as other things that are going out for bid. So regardless of what it is, please see my team and we can tell you. But even more so, even with your cell phone, get signed up on BidSync so that you can see the bids regardless of where you are, and the cost of that is zero, okay? So that's a big piece I want to emphasize, okay? Ryan Krieger is outside if you want to talk about business certification, and again, Portia Robeson is the director of CREO, but should take care of that. To get registered in BidSync, here's what you do. Get registered, and you can click onto this website, or if you got any issues, and if you say, hey, I tried it, it didn't work, please contact our offices so that they can take care of it, okay? And the benefits of self-supplier portal I talked about earlier, and that is it. So get a brochure that we talked about earlier. See me and Portia, Tammy, and some of the others relative to what bids we have out there, how to get certified. I really, really strongly encourage you to, take a shot at some of the bids and the opportunities that we've got out there, and let's make it happen. So with that, I'll turn it over to the President of the City Council, Council President Brenda Jones.
Thank you so very much. So I don't know if anyone have any questions that they would like to ask while we are in this room right here. If you do, we have the directors and the presenters that are in here. So if you have a question, if you go to the mic and ask your question, and get an opportunity to get that question answered. Does anyone have any questions? If you would just give your name, please.
Yeah, my name is Albert Smith. I'm with Hayden Bar Club, representative of them. Why do anybody know that you can start your own business at home?
Do you want to address that, Mr. Jackson?
Repeat the question.
Why do anybody know that they can start their own business at home?
And I think Mr. Bolger wants to add on to what you have to
I
say.
think you're asking, can you start your business at home?
Yes.
Yes, you can. When you get through the process, through building and safety, engineering, you should see them to make sure we get the proper setup there. But there's also, if you are going to do an LLC, for an example, there's some paperwork and a procedure you got to go through so you can be identified as a business. And yes, you can have your base office from home if you pass the necessary requirements. I'll let Rick and the other team in building and safety talk to you about that. But we have some companies that operate on some of our printing services, perhaps like that. You know, some of the people that's doing some of the minor, tree trimming and stuff like that are subcontractors to the big company. They operate out of their home. They get in a truck, they go to work, and that's what they do, but they still have to be licensed. They still have to have an EIN number,
Yeah.
because that's what we pay you off.
Yeah.
We just don't, send you a check in the mail.
Yeah, I know
So you gotta be set up as a business and as a company, and as long as all those things are done, we're good. So the gentleman in the back there, see some of those people in building and safety on the adequate license and permitting. Okay?
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
Mr.
And-
Bolger wants to respond to that as well.
Thanks, Mr. Jackson. The zoning ordinance for the city of Detroit does have provisions in it for businesses in the homes, home occupations. But it's fairly clear that there is certain things wouldn't be allowed. Things like a retail store, or things that would prompt a lot of foot traffic into the building. Kind of the rule of thumb is, if you're able to conduct a business and nobody would know otherwise outside, tends to be okay. There's a whole section of the zoning ordinance which provides specifications. Not more than 25% of the floor area of the dwelling can be used for those purposes. The business has to be operated by the person who lives in the house, and not more than one non-resident employee could be allowed to work on the premises. And again, the general rule of thumb is it has to be pretty much inconspicuous. Signage for the business is generally not permitted. So it's just going to be, if you're operating out of your house, it needs to look pretty much just like any other house that's on the block.
Any additional questions? Any additional questions? Now remember, I always say no question is a dumb question other than the question you walk out the door and you didn't ask.
Good evening, Ms. Jones.
Good evening.
How are you?
I am blessed by the best.
Thank you. Existing demo contractors been in the city for over many, many years, have been shut out because of other draconian things that have been done. How can we get back to work and do what we know how to do very well for the city of Detroit?
And so, Mr. Jackson, you want to respond to that?
just not me, all of us.
Yeah, we got that. I wasn't, I wasn't going to pick at you. Sometimes in the course of doing business, companies are not able to do business for various reasons. I won't get into all the reasons, but the question is a good question. How do you get back reinstated and back so that you can start bidding on contracts and going to business? I think it gets down to having discussions after a period of time with my office as well as the department and the law department. We don't have an ironclad process, but I've seen it happen where people are reintroduced back into the process. For an example, if you are penalizing you out for, pick 2 years, and you're in year 1.5, or whatever year, the first year, you know, I think there's always open, we're always open to sit back down and have a discussion around that. And I think that's the right way to do it. I'm not guaranteeing anything in terms of whether it will make fruition, but I'm committed to certainly sit down and listen to some of the cases where you've been out for a long period of time because you have been penalized or suspended, and then you're trying to be reinstated. I think it's just a matter of sitting down with the right group. I know Tammy and I are a part of an appeal board now. Sometimes, you know, we hear that sometimes the appeal board is not working effectively. But at the same time, we would like for you to come back in and sit down and talk to us. So if you get out for 2 years, you're out for a year and a half, come back in and talk to us. And Tammy, any other comments on it?
I would just say, if you are out because of some issue regarding the appeal board, as Mr. Jackson said, once you've done a year and a half, to petition the board, because they're the ones who are going to make the decision about letting you back in. So put together a petition that lays out all the things that are different, how you continue to do good work, and just lay out your story, and it will be considered.
I like her point on the comment on lay out your story. I would definitely consider that. If I was out, just putting myself in your place, and I was out for a period of time, I now want to get back into the business. I need to come back in and say, hey, here's what I'm doing differently. Here's what the things you all indicated that I was not performing well on, and here is what I'm doing. Here's the changes that I made, or here's the things I was doing well that I'm gonna do more of. It could be leadership changes, it could be process change, it could be equipment change, it could be technology changes. But I think in the premise of coming back with a fresher look at it, and I think on our side, we gotta have a fresher look at it as well. That's what I would suggest.
And also, if there is earnest on your side and earnest on both sides, who shall own up to both sides if there was errors on both sides of the coin? No matter if there was nothing developed at that time and everybody got hurt and penalized because there's nothing that developed.
Hold on 1 second. We've got a few more people that want to ask questions, so you can talk with them on the outside, because I know this is a longer discussion than that.
I'll let them be peaceful. So.
I have a question.
Hi. I am just starting to get into this small business, or like business for my own. I've been an engineer for like 20 years, so I'm like brand new. I'm here for information because this is brand new for me. So my friends always encourage me to do my own thing because I'm really good at what I do. The question is, I've seen the number of the small percentage for minority women businesses getting contracts. Can you give us any pointers on, you know, what have you seen in the past, or how can we, you know, increase that number, or what have you seen, and how can you help, or give us some pointers in terms of how to gain and get those contracts?
Yeah, very good question. Matter of fact, let me go back. Right here. We're very low. You saw the percentage on women, okay? These two over to the left challenge me and others all the time about doing more. So these small empowerment fairs, and this is the second one, and they have many others planned throughout this city. I think that helps. But above all, Sandra, raise your hand. I hired Sandra just recently just to reach out with businesses like yourself. She's brand new in the city, and I brought her in, and one more gentleman in here that is also going to join the team. He don't know it yet, but at the same time, we're going to have people work with you one-on-one to talk about how you can market your goods and services. We got to teach you how to bid, because just doing a bid and just plopping on a 40% profit margin is not going to get you competitive with other people in the business. So you got to know what your value of your goods and services are, and you got to know what the market rates are for your goods and services. If you are doing catering, if you are doing house cleaning, home cleaning, someone had a good idea, matter of fact, and wanted to join that business. She just registered, which was great. But she said, I don't know what to bid. So we got to help mentor that. And that's why we're hiring these people to do mentorship. Sandra has a lot of experience in it, and so does one of the other people in here, Renee. So I've got to do more of that to help you. But in the meantime, get registered tonight. Because in BidSync, you will build a profile that really talks about what your core competency is, and you can be able to talk to us. I can't tell you what to bid. What I could do is tell you what the market rates are running across the United States, okay? And I can share with you how to do a good bid, okay? Because it's not that simple. People just think they can write it on a sheet of paper and turn it in. No, you got to have some science around that. Yeah.
I'm Irvin Bassett.
Can you go to the mic, please? Because we are being taped.
Hi, I'm Irvin Bassett. Good afternoon. Good evening, everybody. Listen, when you bid, do you get your 100% of your money back, or do you get a certain percentage back? When you bid.
When you bid, you don't get any money back. We are paying you. When you bid for services here in the city, we are on a contract with you to pay you X amount to do the work for us. So that's
what I'm saying is, when you put your money up to bid, and you don't get the bid, you get your money back.
I see your question. Good question. Bottom line, we don't ask you for no money when you bid. So let's be clear. In terms of construction and some of the major things, there are two kinds of bonds sometimes that we ask you for. One is a performance bond, and one is a bid bond. But if you don't get it, no, we don't keep it. So to answer your question, that goes back to you. But no, rarely do we ever have you depositing anything. And that is not monetary in any shape, form, or fashion. It's just basically a bid bond. And you go through a surety company or some other place to do that. Let me also touch on one thing that Tammy just told me and go back to later to talk about women businesses. The certification process that we talked about earlier would also help you if you go get registered and certified for women-based business, okay? That's the Wbe certification. That's a good point, because that will give you the up on somebody else, okay? Did I answer your question, sir?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. This is going to be our last question.
Okay.
Okay, I was more interested in the tree removal.
Okay.
Okay, where I live, and the next door neighbors, they have a huge tree, and any day now it's going to come in my back porch. And so I called, DTE Services was out last summer, and they said I couldn't do anything about it. The neighbors would have to call regarding it. And then they also stated to me that it's not on a line, but this tree is hollow, it's super tall. It's gonna fall any minute now. Every time I even have guests over, they're like, this tree finna fall on your backyard, back porch.
So that's a neighborhood question, and Jerome from my staff, he can get your information.
Oh, okay.
We want to thank you all for being here. And for those that stuck and stayed, we have a few door prizes that we're going to give. And we're looking at those that came in first, and we'll just go down the list. So, Member Ayers?
All right, so is Dolly Patterson here? All right. Oh, Lord, they didn't give me the wrong sheet. Look, that's trying to figure.
You have to be
Trying to
present
figure out,
and
right,
to
we trying to
win.
figure out the best way to give it to somebody. We trying to.
Did you sign in?
She did.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. Well, you look like it's going to you. And actually, these are 2 tickets to Damon John's Success Team event, and they were donated by Victoria Ehringer from customer relations. She's customer relations specialist, and so here you are, your 2 tickets, and that's for Saturday, July 21st.
Is that Quay Edwards? Quay Edwards?
That was twice. Gone.
Going once, Quay Edwards. Going twice, Quay Edwards. Gone. Rich. I think this says Hawkins. Rich, going once. Going twice. Gone. Lamar Munson. Lamar.
Look at he's like right here.
Okay, we have 2 tickets for Shane Park, a Saturday, July 28th, for the Lost 80s Live. And that will conclude our 2 giveaways. And we thank you for coming and being a part of our 2nd Small Business Empowerment Fair. And I don't know about the 3rd because we originally planned 2. So we have had really a great response from the businesses and people that were interested in doing business with the city come out. So member heirs will continue to discuss whether or not there will be a part 3.
Oh, it's gonna be a part 3. Don't even worry, because our offices have already started putting it together. So there'll be a 3, a 4, a 5, a 6,
All right.
a 7.
So we will continue to move forward as we continue to have people. So thank you all. Don't forget, we have refreshments in the basement if you take the elevator to space 4. So again, thank you all. Thank you for the presenters. Let's give the presenters a round of applause. They have worked today, and they came out to make sure that you all were educated. There's nothing worse than being educated on what you need, staying in the dark, and that's what it's all about, is educating you on how to help yourself do better, and we are here to try to assist you in any way humanly possible that we can. So again, thank you all for being here. Thank the presenters for coming out, and we look forward to having more people do business in the city of Detroit and helping those who have had a problem getting back started in the city of Detroit. So again, thank you. Thank our camera crew, our media people for being here. They have also worked all day as well. And also, I want to again thank my colleague, Councilmember Ayers and Councilmember McAllister, who was here with us. And thanks to the staff that helped get this together from both my office as well as her office. And thank you for all of the volunteers who were here. Without staff and without volunteers, we couldn't get a lot done, because a council member by themselves sometimes would be a little overwhelmed trying to make sure that you get everything that you need. So again, thank you all for being here. Member Ayers, you want to close us out?
She hit the nail on the head. So only thing I would suggest is that if you all have friends that have visions of having their own businesses as well, talk to them. Because there's no reason this room shouldn't have been wall to wall with folks. Because everybody is talking about wanting an opportunity. We're presenting a pathway to that. And so I commend all of you for being here, because you're not just talking about it, you're actually doing something. And that's what we're doing too. So thank you guys, and God bless you. Have a great night.
Have a great night.